When the Russians showed off weaponry like that, I assumed the only thing that might defeat that was more weapons. And yet, Reason Magazine editor Matt Welch says that is not what happened. I thought that was what brought the Soviet down. Reagan's arms buildup.
It's not the only thing that happened. Reagan and the United States and the West were certainly very, very important. And when Gorbachev decided not to crack down on Germany and other places with force of arms, which had been the Soviet way, that allowed these things to happen. However, there were very important anti-communist revolutionaries all throughout Eastern Europe that very much helped this thing to happen. And they didn't do it, generally speaking, by firing a single shot. They did it through principled dissidence, protests, writing, and acts of art. In Czechoslovakia, it was rock music. It was art.
They called it the Velvet Revolution there.
They did.
What was that about?
Because of the Velvet Underground, a dirt rock band, art rock band from New York City. Smuggled in a tape in Prague in 1968. It lit on fire people there. There was a rock band there that called itself the Plastic People of the Universe that played a lot of Velvet Underground covers. All of it was forbidden. And ultimately, these guys were thrown in jail in 1976 for disturbing the peace because they played unauthorized rock music and they grew their hair long, which was also a crime back then. And Václav Havel and other dissidents finally said, that's it. Enough is enough. They formed Charter 77, the single most influential anti-communist group ever formed in the world. They started it to defend a rock band, basically, from unjust persecution.
In East Germany, Bruce Springsteen was allowed to perform, and he sang Born in the USA. And look at the size of the crowd that was there. I'm amazed they allowed this. This helped bring freedom to East Germany?
I would argue that it did. And when you see the liberating kind of force of rock and roll music and
all these East Germans singing Born in the USA.
Singing Born in the USA and saying they wanted to tear down these barriers, which meant the wall in Berlin.
You did stories on the effect of Dallas on Romania.
Yes.
What do you mean?
So in Romania, they only had 4 hours of television a day. 2 hours, generally speaking, was Dallas. They proved it because
it was going to show the excess of
the evil decadence, just like Bruce Springsteen's going to show, just like they would show, Woody Guthrie, or they would show things that were critiques of the American system. And what people who live in captive countries see this as, like, oh my gosh, these people actually have freedom of expression, which we don't have, and that's great. And meanwhile, look at that Cadillac. Are you kidding? Those women can drink and hold huge shopping bags and do what they want. So in Romania, Dallas was the single biggest cultural force in that entire country. The Velvet Revolution was started by students, people who were exactly my age. I went there in 1990. I was fortunate enough to see it back when, the store was still called Store and there was nothing to buy there except for potatoes and onions, maybe. That revolution was very much inspired by artistry, by freedom of expression, and these types of things.
One last example of nonviolent resistance to communism occurred in Estonia. People in that country suffered horribly under Soviet oppression.
In one night, 10,000 men, women, and children were taken from their homes, loaded into cattle cars, and shipped to slave labor camps in Siberia.
They lived under Soviet rule for about 50 years, but even before the Berlin Wall fell, some Estonians resisted Soviet rule.
The Communist Party issued a stern warning.
But people in Estonia waved the forbidden Estonian flag and danced and sang. Today they call it the Singing Revolution. At one point, nearly a third of all Estonians showed up and sang. The Soviets tried to stop this protest by sending troops to seize the radio station. But Estonians linked arms and delayed the soldiers. Eventually, the soldiers backed off. Just people saying no more.
Yeah. What happens is when enough people just say, forget it, I'm no longer going to listen to what you're telling me both to do and to not do. That is, as Václav Havel predicted during communism back in 1975, that moment becomes when everything is exposed as being a thin, thin tissue, and suddenly people can break through and express their own freedom.
Thank you, Matt Welch. Will that happen to our big government regulatory state? I doubt it, but coming up, it's clear communism doesn't work, so will American politicians embrace capitalism? Probably not.
My fellow Americans, we have found a third way.